in more detail. With us is Natasha Devon, founder of the Self-Esteem Team, a campaign group that works with teenagers on mental health and body image, and writer and broadcaster and mischief maker, Milo Yiannopoulos. Let's see how we get on today. It's great to see you, Natasha. Congratulations on the MBE, by the way.
Thank you
for taking the time to join us this afternoon. You presumably, I'm sure you welcome the decision. What impact might it have?
I think body image, the more I learn about it, the more complicated I realise it is. And things like mannequins and adverts, they're symbols, really, I think, more than anything, of the pressures that women face. So Topshop's decision is a victory, but it's not going to change. It's not going to change anything significant, I don't think.
Why not?
Because it runs so deep, it's in the very fabric of our society, and that's why we go into schools and work on changing mindsets and giving young people the armour they need to question capitalism, because it's in the very fabric of the world that we live in. A mannequin, it might shock you out of your revelry, and that's certainly what's happened with this campaign, but this stuff is all around us all the time.
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it, to hear about, the fact that there's apparently a problem with women worrying about being too thin. That's, of course, not the problem. The problem is that everyone's getting too fat. And actually, there's no evidence, really, that any of this stuff has much of an impact. A lot of the science is very fuzzy on this. It's social science stuff rather than any real sort of reports or anything. I mean, what worries me about all of this kind of stuff is the implication that somehow we're going to make people's lives happier or better by encouraging them to believe that whatever body shape they are and whatever they look like, they're beautiful and they're going to be happy. That's evident. That's quite clearly not the case. I mean, if you look at women's happiness has been going down since the Second World War, actually. Every decade, but women are getting more miserable as they get told that they can be who they want and look how they like. And you can say, I suppose, that a woman's self-esteem should have nothing to do with whether or not a man's sexual preference, sort of coincides with how she looks. But the fact is, women are getting more unhappy. And this sort of slightly irresponsible trend to sort of encourage people to eat whatever they want and do whatever they want is is one of the things that's fueling an obesity crisis. And that's a really serious thing. That's a real thing. That's something that's got health implications. It's got cost implications for the NHS. The problem isn't too many anorexic women. The problem is quite in the opposite direction. We're perfectly happy to have aspirational role models in our entertainment. We should have them too in our retail. There's nothing wrong with encouraging people to live healthily.
There's so much wrong with what you just said. First of all, the message is not eat whatever you want, sit on your sofa and eat lard all day. The message is live a healthy lifestyle and then see how your body ends up. There's quite a wide spectrum within which the human body can exist and be healthy. Human beings come in lots of different shapes and sizes, and that should be reflected in retail, because after all, it's us that's spending our money on those clothes. There's also evidence to show that our thin worshipping culture is actually what's fueling the obesity crisis, that it makes people feel shameful, that it makes people eat more, it makes people feel excluded from the world of health. I was recently in Copenhagen, a place where they are obsessed with health in a very positive way, and the mannequins, I noticed, were a little larger. So why not allow people the freedom to see themselves reflected in shop windows?
I don't think that anybody's complaining about, having realistic types if they want them in certain places. The problem is when you start sort of bullying retailers into getting rid of aspirational body types, making clothes look worse in the window. I mean, if you look, when a woman goes shopping, for example, she quite often looks at clothes that are a smaller size than she'll actually wear, because she wants to know how that garment's actually going to look. These sorts of aspirational...
Not sure that's true, but go on.
Well, I love how we're being told what women look for when they go shopping.
This is obviously from the sort of mansplaining school of feminism, which of course also hates capitalism, as we heard earlier. And there's always, what I really don't like about this debate is it's a sort of women-on-women kind of violence. This isn't really about whether sort of heteropatriarchal, capitalistic sort of superstructure or weird atmosphere that is encouraging women to have unhealthy attitudes towards their bodies. What this is really about, unfortunately, very often, is older women who aren't very happy taking out their frustration on younger women and on youth culture. And if you look, unfortunately, at a lot of the activists who do this, the people who make the complaints, the journalists, the media figures who are doing this, very often they are older, very often they are single, very often they are taking out, their frustrations in their own personal lives on brands that are aimed at 22-year-old girls who are much closer to the sorts of body shapes that we see in the windows.
You're taking out your frustration on the youth of today.
Well, I've been completely misrepresented, which of course is when you're losing an argument, it's the easiest thing to do, isn't it, to try and put me in a box where I'm suddenly a militant feminist. I am a former model. I've worked in the fashion industry. I know that it's run mainly by women and homosexual men, and so So the patriarchy really doesn't have that much of an impact in that sphere. Also, you know, it's when I go shopping, what I want to know is what the garment will look like on me, not on a 6'1" dummy with a 26-inch waist. If you cannot design for a realistic body shape, then you're not a very good designer. If you can only design for a coat hanger, you're creating art, not a garment that's designed for a human body.
I'm not sure where this sort of obsession with realism and realistic proportions has come from. I mean, there are blogs, sort of feminist blogs out there that show, you know, video game characters in more realistic proportions. They turn Lara Croft into this sort of dumpy, lesbianic, you know, short woman in cargo pants, and nobody really wants to see that. Nobody wants, not even women. It's not an aspirational sort of icon that people can aspire to be like. The fact is, we do have a huge problem with people treating their own health very irresponsibly. And I personally find when media figures and feminists and activists and campaigners encourage women to worship themselves no matter what their size and what their shape, actually that just has the effect of making women unhappy. And women have been getting more unhappy decade after decade after decade since the Second World War, since this stuff started to happen.
OK, we're debating, we're not being offensive, are we?
No.
So what would you say?
I'm just talking about science. I mean,
OK.
I would like to see diversity on the high street, because I don't want to see naturally slender women excluded from the world of fashion either. You take any one beauty paradigm, you take a size 16 mannequin, you take a size 0 mannequin and present that as the only way to be beautiful. Both of those are problematic. I want to see lots of different shapes, sizes, ages and races on the high street, and I think I disagree. I think that will lead to greater happiness for women.
That's never really true, is it? I mean, people don't want to see diversity. They always seem to want to see larger models and larger mannequins. I mean, the direction, the trajectory of pressure from
surely they want to
activists
be able to see what clothes will look like before they try them on.
Well, they can see what they'll look like on them by trying them on.
Yeah.
I mean, designers put clothes on skinny women because it looks better, because that's what people like
because
to look at. Both women
and
men prefer to look at that. I mean, the fact is, you know, again, this is not really about men at all. This is about pressures that women put on other women, you know, to look good and to stay thin and to stay healthy. And frankly, those women who do aspire to look like what, you know, you may think are sort of stereotypical standards of beauty or unattainable sort of beauty standards, women who do look like that tend to be happier. They tend to have better success in relationships, and they tend to report that they're more content with life. When I said, you know, women are getting more unhappier every decade, I'm not just pulling that out of my behind. Women these days report, as compared to even 50 years ago, they're far more depressed. They're far more likely to report themselves as generally unhappy with life. They're far more likely to be single, and they're far more likely to contemplate suicide. And a lot of this has got to do with the fact that after 30, women do struggle to be happy if they're not in relationships. And part of the reason that many women are not in relationships is you've got these weird celebrities like Lena Dunham, who put sort of, you know, being quivering and blobby and unpleasant as a sort of virtue on our screens, encouraging women to turn themselves into quite unattractive, you know, sort of spectacles. I don't think that's particularly healthy for anybody, but ultimately it doesn't really affect men. It certainly doesn't affect me as a homosexual. It just affects women because you're making women unhappy.
Final thought.
The final thought is that what we should find aspirational is health. You can't look at somebody and ascertain how healthy they are. Health is about lifestyle, not looks. So I want to encourage people to celebrate their bodies, because people who like their bodies look after them. It's the same as with a car. If you had a lovely, shiny new car, you would clean it regularly, you'd put the right fuel into it. People who hate their bodies don't look after them.
People who hate their bodies look for affirmation, self-help, you know, sort of motivational speaking of the kind that that you do, because they want to feel good about how they look no matter what their size or shape. People who feel good about their bodies go to the gym.
Come back on that.
Well, I go to the gym, and I'm not single. I'm in a long-term relationship. I think that you've stereotyped women who want to see diversity because it makes you feel better.
But it's always
to think that
one
we're all
direction,
bitter and that we're all bitter and militant. I want to see diversity. I want to celebrate women. I love women. I love fashion, and I want to see everybody invited to the fashion party. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Do you love women?
Of course.
Great. Good to see you both. Thank you very much.
Joining me now to discuss this and the wider implications are the columnist and broadcaster Milo Yiannopoulos and the journalist Rennie Edo-Lodge. They're in our central London studios for us this evening. Very good evening to you both. Rennie, how do you feel about being called different because you're hardwired differently? I'm sure it's not something you've failed to hear before. It just seems to keep cropping up. Is it necessary?
It's ridiculous. It's 50s thinking, you know. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, this biological determinism. Frankly, you know, interests and talent and, you know, passions for particular topics, subjects, sports, arts, whatever, like, they're not relegated to either gender, but unfortunately, because of some stereotypical thinking, often one gender is encouraged to pursue, you know, a sport or an art more so than the other. And actually, when you look at my colleague at the Telegraph, Radhika Saghani, she wrote a piece just this morning speaking to like young girls who play chess, and actually what she found out is that they're dropping out at the age of 12, probably because, you know, they're not encouraged, or, you know, there's an environment around that's telling them that it's not for them, it's not cool, etc., etc. So, you know, this hardwired brain stuff, like it's retro-sexism.
So, Milo Yiannopoulos, does it matter if men and women are wired differently, have different skills?
No, it doesn't matter in the sense that they are equal but different, but it simply isn't true to say that there is no difference whatsoever between the aptitudes of men and women. And it is, without question, true that there are some biological differences between men and women, and we know that from our anatomy. But we also know it from experiments that we do on young children before they've had the opportunity to be socialised, the sorts of toys that they go for. And that holds true, actually, for other bits of the animal kingdom as well. Some of the reason why girls drop out of STEM subjects at college and chess clubs is because they keep losing. And one of the reasons they keep losing is that it does seem to be the case that chess as a game plays to some of the male intellectual virtues. And when Simon Baron-Cohen talks about these, the way he describes it is men are good at systematizing and women are good at empathizing. And there is some reason to suppose that that may have some basis in biology. It's very trendy these days to say that everything is socially determined, but that's not what the science says. And it's not either what common sense says, because if it were true, these days there would be a lot more representation of women in the sciences, in astrophysics, in philosophy, in mathematics, and in chess, but there isn't.
So, Rennie, does that make sense? And does it really matter? I mean, should we just accept that we are slightly different, have different skills, pursue them, or should we all be striving to be as good as each other at everything?
It seems really reductive, to be honest with you. I mean, if you look around at your, you know, male and female friends and families, you'll see a vast, like a huge wide variety and diversity in interests and talents and passions, right? And also I think that it's ridiculous to assume that the reason why one gender is overrepresented in a field is because the other gender is not quite up to it. I mean, often, you know, if a field is homogenous, right, which, as we can see, chess is homogenous, that also brings with it a culture that makes things unwelcoming for people who do not quite fit the bill. Like, it's so, you know, it's almost victim blaming in a way to suggest that the reason why there's an overrepresentation of a particular kind of person is because the other kind of person just isn't quite up to it. Like, it's ridiculous. If that was the case, we don't live in a meritocracy. So
it's nice to have these sort of vague, waffly, sort of everyone has varied interests. What the science suggests is that, for example, when it comes to IQ is distributed differently between the sexes. Now, IQ gets a really bad rap because it's not a great indicator of some things. It's said to be sexist, it's said to be biased towards white people, whatever. The point is that it tests, in this case, it tests all of the skills that make you good at chess really well. It's about puzzles, it's about games, exactly the skills that make you good at chess, make you good at IQ. Now, the way that IQ is distributed differently in the sexes is that women tend to cluster around the mean. Women are more likely to have an IQ that is somewhere near the average, whereas men go right to the top or right to the bottom more often, which is why you get great genius male artists and philosophers, but it's also why men fill the prisons, because men seem to occupy more of the ends of the IQ scale. And now IQ is pretty much the best measure we have to predict whether somebody will be good at chess.
And what it also proves that men and women can talk forever. It's been a pleasure talking to you both. We're going to leave it there. Thank goodness we're all different.
Well, look, one of the biggest disappointments of the current president is that he came in promising hope and change and unity, and he ended up being incredibly divisive. Gridlock in Washington is some of the worst that we've ever seen. Race relations are completely awful, and I think the country is feeling completely divided. Anybody who has made those criticisms of the president under no circumstances should think that Donald Trump is presidential material. You only need to look at his comments on women, or only his comments on Mexicans, or only his comments on Muslims to know that he is a great divider. But put them all together, and this is somebody who is going to tear us apart.
You see, you say that, but that's not what the polls show. Donald Trump's doing really well with women, and he's doing better with Hispanics than, what is it, any Republican since the 1920s? He's doing great with all the minorities that commentators like to say that he's somehow bigoted against. He's doing great with everybody. He's even doing great with Democrats. 20% of Democrats said they'd vote for Donald Trump. So, you know, you hear a lot about Donald Trump being this sort of offensive, clownish populist figure, and he is a populist, and people love it.
These polls are terribly skewed at the moment because there's so many Republicans on that national stage. People are looking to him. They're, big fans of his, but they're only at that 30% mark. He has never polled over that 35% mark, and that's because his unfavorability ratings are sky high. They're so much higher than any previous presidential candidate who's actually looking to get the nominations has been. People are polling at 60%, 55%, saying that they will never vote for him. So yes, at the moment, because other people are splitting the votes, he's doing very well. But when you have 60% of the population saying they will never vote for this man ever, put him up against Hillary Clinton, put him up against Bernie Sanders, and he will fail.
Well, you see, again, you say that, but there's been a recent change in the polls. It used to be the case that he was trailing.
His unfavorability ratings are still
unfavorability ratings
high.
Aren't great, but he was trailing Hillary. You know, if he wins the nomination, he was trailing Hillary by what, 10 percentage points?
Huge, 20 percentage
Not
points.
Anymore. He's now 3 points ahead, 4 points ahead, and some of the polls put him 5 points ahead. What scares people about Donald Trump is they want to attack him the way the media always attacks anybody popular and who actually speaks in plain language to ordinary people about the things they care about, whether it's immigration or jobs or whatever.
But is he a misogynistic racist?
Of course not. He just speaks plainly, and he doesn't mind who he offends because he thinks that the subjects he talks about matter. And when he said last night in the debate, he responded brilliantly to the allegation that he was an angry man. He said, yeah, I am angry, and here are the reasons why. And everybody in that room was behind him.
But if you want somebody who's actually going to attack the anger that Americans are feeling towards the elites, and you want someone who's actually going to stand up and do that,
the ultimate
you need
candidate
somebody
for that.
who, A, has a policy. I'm just asking for one. I mean, the man flip-flops on every single issue. All he says is, I'm going to make America great again.
He's totally consistent on immigration. And by the way,
saying that millions of people, regardless of who they are individually, cannot come into your country is not an immigration policy, it's also not constitutional. As Rand Paul has pointed out many times, so much of what he proposes...
People agree with him. And,
people do not agree with overthrowing the Constitution in America. I promise you that.
Donald Trump was saying, let's look at whether we should have a temporary halt on Muslim immigration before Cologne. Now Cologne has happened, the whole game has changed.
I don't think
Americans
the whole game
are watching
has changed.
Germany, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, we do not want this in America.
I don't think
and
that
the only
Americans
Republican
have become
candidate,
racist
Don't do pointy fingers.
The only Republican candidate who was saying this was Trump. Trump has been right about immigration, over and over and over again, and he's been ahead of everybody else doing it.
There are deeply conservative candidates like Senator Ted Cruz who are very skeptical of immigration and who have come down hard, who have even said, I want to build a wall with Mexico. Now, I don't particularly...
Well, he said it after Trump.
I don't particularly want to subscribe to that, but there are other candidates out there who are offering these ideas to voters.
And they're polling at 2-3%.
Ted Cruz is about to beat him in Iowa.
You know what?
There are other candidates.
No.
I think the bigger point here is that I am completely understanding of Americans who are frustrated and skeptical of the current system now. What I don't understand is how, when you have other options, you could possibly say that somebody who has been so sexist and so rude against other ethnicities.
And women don't agree with you. Hispanics don't agree with you.
Most of
Blacks
them
don't agree with you. They don't.
Massive generalisation, surely.
No, it's based on poll numbers. Trump is rating higher with blacks, higher with Hispanics, and higher with women than any other Republican candidate for decades.
There's a campaign in the United Kingdom.
What ordinary voters believe about Donald Trump is so different from what you'll hear from the media and the commentariat. It is untrue.
Milo,
the media did this with UKIP. It backfired. It did it with Corbyn. It backfired. It's doing it now with Trump, and it will backfire here
Milo,
too. And Sanders, for that matter.
But you and I would agree that UKIP and Jeremy Corbyn are not going to be Prime Minister of the UK anytime soon.
No, but Trump, on the other hand, does have a chance to make America great again.
All the suggestion in the polls is actually that he doesn't, that those more moderate candidates are much more likely to beat Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump
not what the latest numbers show.
Yes, it is.
They show
he is doing
if he won the nomination today.
But we're still talking about tiny percentages in comparison to the majority of the population.
If he were a sexist and a bigot, wouldn't he be doing terribly with minorities? Wouldn't he, in fact, have at least an average rating with minorities? He doesn't. He has the best numbers with minorities of any Republican candidate in decades.
I have no idea what's in his heart. I have no idea if in his heart he is a racist or a bigot. Frankly, I think I'm not sure he is either. He's such a populist.
Look how many women are in his businesses.
He is such a populist that I think if Americans were skeptical of young white women coming into the country, he would go on TV and say that we should ban them. He is such a populist. All he is doing is trying to feed in to what he thinks is going to make him a winner and get him votes, which is why we've seen him flip-flop on every single issue. He's been willing to say anything. I think people are feeding into him to some extent because they like that he isn't PC, they like that he's an alternative to the establishment, but a man who had the opportunity to actually talk about the serious issues ran with fear and emotion and has made outrageous and hurtful and wrong comments. He's lied on air.
You see, where we differ is I don't care about feelings. I don't care about offense taking.
Do you care about the facts? Do you care about lying about the number
I don't
of people?
care about offense taking. I don't care about feelings. You say, oh, he's so offensive, he's so bigoted, he says the awful things about women. American voters don't care either. They agree with him and they agree with me.
I care about facts and I care about the Constitution and I care about upholding the rule of law. And Donald Trump threatens all of those things. And his idea, especially with Barack Obama making this executive action on gun control, this precedent has now been set that if Donald Trump comes in, he's going to be able to use executive action to make some very dangerous decisions.
But Trump is saying he wants to repeal the unlawful things that Obama has done. I mean, Obama's come in and tried to undermine the Second Amendment, which I think we both are strong supporters of, at every available opportunity. You know, he has used his relationship, he has put in place an attorney general who hates the Second Amendment, who wants to take guns off everybody. He himself wants to take guns off everybody. He's tried to undermine it every opportunity. Trump's the one who's come in and said, I will repeal President Obama's unlawful executive actions.
I'll appeal President Obama's unlawful executive actions, and I'll put in place my own. Both men are not the example of presidential material.
It's not just him that said that.
Several candidates have said that.
Yeah. What would the USA look like if he was president?
Well, luckily we have a system that has a lot of checks and balances. I think it would actually be very difficult for President Trump to put into place a lot of the things that he proposes. But given the fact that the past 8 years have been defined by gridlock, the economy remains relatively stagnant, I think you would see so much more of that. Look at President Reagan. He was a B-list Hollywood actor, but the reason that he became such a great uniter and such a great politician is because he took the time to read and to create policies.
But Trump is a Reaganite candidate.
He is so far from it. This is a man who does not have policy, and if he were to be elected, America would be lost. I don't think it would be in complete and utter destruction on day one, but it would be deeply lost, and we need real leadership. We've had 8 years without it.
Hypothetically, we could find... Hello. Hypothetically, we could find ourselves in a position where the new president of the United States of America is banned from the United Kingdom.
Yeah, because British politicians are idiots, and they would rather spend valuable parliamentary time talking about language policing than fixing poverty or fighting terrorism.
Language policing to you, racism to others.
No, well, where has Donald Trump been a racist? Black voters love him. Shouldn't we listen to them rather than to, like, white commentariats? Shouldn't we listen to black voters rather than white people on TV saying that Donald Trump's such a racist? Black people don't agree.
Milo and I agree on this point, but for completely different reasons. I don't think that Donald Trump should be banned from the UK. I think that the 500,000 people that signed that petition actually fed into an immigration system that Donald Trump would support. They want to ban him based on his ideology because he wants to ban other people based on their ideology. That doesn't add up to me. Completely different reason, but I don't think he should be banned from the UK. It's a silly proposal.
There are lots of good reasons why it is totally dumb for the people who run this country to be wasting time on whether they should ban a person who is currently a candidate for president and a reality TV star and a successful businessman who has some perfectly respectable, ordinary views that millions of people share, but somebody got upset about it somewhere on the page of The Guardian, so now we have to discuss this in Parliament.
I'm not sure who's hateful, but that doesn't matter.
We're almost out of time. This is absolutely fascinating. Hopefully you'll come back and talk to us again soon. Who will win the nomination?
Oh, gosh.
Donald Trump.
Wait your turn, Milo.
Sorry.
That's unlikely.
I'm just so excited about him.
I'm sure.
I'm split at the moment. If I had to pick now based on the polling, it's between Senator Marco Rubio and Senator Ted Cruz. I think what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire in the next few weeks will determine that frontrunner.
Your turn.
Can't stump the Trump. Donald Trump is going to win. He's going to get the nomination, absent sort of gerrymandering from the Republican establishment, which is still a possibility. He will win the nomination. What the latest polls show is if he does, he'll beat Clinton.
And he'll make America great again?
He will make